Thanks for joining me and tuning in to Midwest Clay Project's Spray Booth tutorial video. What you're going to learn in this video is how to set up this machine for use, what it's good for, what it's not so good at. You'll learn how to actually apply the glaze and then the cleanup that's involved in using this machine. So the Spray Booth is super good at dealing with large pieces. So objects that would be difficult for you to glaze by dipping. Objects that have unusual shapes, so it exceeds at glazing sculpture as well. Or again, just complicated objects where dipping this into a glaze would be difficult. One other area where the Spray Booth does excel is in recoating already glazed objects, because the spray will stick to that glassy surface better than it will if you were to dip that same object in the glaze. And you have the ability to kind of build that up. Some of the things that this machine is not so great at, though, are glazing into tight spaces. So like the interior of this jug, you would not want to try and spray the glaze into here. You're better off still pouring it in and then dumping it back out. Additionally, interiors for bowls, sometimes the curve of that bowl when you spray it in will kind of shoot some of the back spray back at your face. So those are better for pouring as well. It's not always the greatest at getting into highly textured areas. This jug here is probably about as detailed as I would want to get in terms of the texture and small areas. If you had a whole bunch of like overlapping pieces of clay or a texture that's very deep, the spray can prove difficult to get into that space. The Spray Booth can also be somewhat time consuming in terms of its setup and its cleanup. So if you're just doing a couple of things and they're small, you may still be better off by pouring or dipping. Let's talk a little bit about the different components and parts that go into the Spray Booth. So we have this large spray hood here. When you're spraying, you do want your pieces inside of here. We're going to set them on this metal table. There's a blue banding wheel that's going to live in here. And this is adjustable in and out depending on where you want to have your object. And you may change that during the spraying if you're noticing that too much of the spray is bouncing back towards you. This is also fully removable for ease of cleaning. Up here we've got just a little lamp just to shine some light on what we're doing in the Spray Booth. And then additionally in the back here we have an aluminum baffle filter. Periodically we'll have to get this out and spray it down, but you'll do a surface cleaning of that at the end. We have our spray gun. This is a simple style spray gun. It fits mason jar style lids, but we're not using glass ones simply for obvious reasons. This straw extends down into the jar. So we'll fill this jar with glaze, screw the lid on. And then as we squeeze the trigger here, air is going to be shot through this area, through the nozzle that's going to go over this little tip. And that tip is connected to that straw, and it's going to draw the glaze material up and then spray it forward onto your object. This works really well for our glazes, and you may find that if you're spraying a commercial glaze, you might have to water it down just a little bit. Just a caution, if you water down our glazes or a commercial glaze to make them spray better, you may have to apply additional coats. Additionally on here, it does have this quick connector. To get this off, you're going to pull back on this outer housing and kind of hold the piece in place, and that should just allow it to pop free. There's not really a need to do this if you're using it normally, except if you wanted to use a different spray gun. Perhaps you purchased your own from a lot of automotive paint sprayers work really well for this as well. There's a little hanging hook here for you to put the gun. The main reason that these guns fail is from being dropped. This is a brass fitting on the front, as if it's dropped it dents and it doesn't work so well anymore. There is an adjustment here. This does move side to side, up and down. You shouldn't have to adjust it, but if the spray isn't doing what you want, if it's not enough or it's too much, you can make micro adjustments to that little nut and it will change how much glaze comes through. The last thing in our booth here is there is a drain in the front left corner. That drain doesn't have a plug or anything, so as you're sponging this out at the end, the water will drain into a bucket that should be on the floor underneath there. The other pieces and parts that you need to be aware of are going to be over here. There is this yellow power strip. You are going to simply flip this switch to turn both the compressor and the lamp on. Right now I've got the compressor unplugged, but you'll leave that plugged in and just flip this switch. It gets pretty loud once that's plugged in. And then back over here, we have the exhaust fan switch as well. That fan is also pretty loud, so you can hear that it's on. And we'll only have that on while we're actively spraying. As far as prep goes, you're going to want to get a 5-gallon bucket of water. I'd say about half full is good. You want clean water in there. We're going to use that if we change colors and also at the end to clean up the spray gun and spray booth. You'll also want a cleanup sponge, and then I usually grab just one small piece of tape that I'll stick to the side of the banding wheel here. And that's going to help me, especially if my object that I'm glazing is round, so that I know where I started my spray and when I've come all the way around. The first coat, as you'll find out, is very easy to see when you've got the whole thing coated, but subsequent coats can become confusing very quickly in terms of where you've sprayed and where you haven't. So that's just a good little hack to help you remember that. All right, let's get to the spraying. I'm going to start by turning on my compressor here, turn on my exhaust fan as well. I've got a square vase that I'm going to be glazing here, and I'm going to use a turquoise glaze. So I'll mix that up as normal. One critical step here is anybody using the spray booth must, while they're spraying at all times, wear an N95 or P100 rated mask. Remember, glaze is made up of fine minerals and metals that are being atomized and sprayed. The exhaust hood should get rid of them all, but the mask is going to be a crucial secondary step, just to make sure you're not breathing that since your face is right up in there. We're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start spraying this vase. Notice my tape marking side one. With an object like this, I typically would start upside down so I can glaze that foot area. Notice that I'm really changing my angle there to get up into that space. I'll be able to get out the sides when I flip it, but this bottom area I will not get at again. Now, I probably should be using a little yellow sponge to wipe up that glaze that's accumulating on the wax and dripping down my corners. I wasn't loving how that was kind of making the corners, there's excess glaze there. So now I'm just going to go ahead and thoroughly spray this at least 2 more times, using my tape as my guide. And then when I'm done, I'll just wipe off the waxed areas, including those corners and that gallery area where my lid will sit later. And then I'm going to clean up my workstation and do some glazing of a sculpture for you as well. In glazing the sculpture, I'll have to go a little bit slower around. I want to spray just up to the point where it's starting to almost look wet, and then I want to move on. What you're looking for is kind of a texture that's almost fur as you kind of build up here. So I'm going to linger on this corner just for a moment, spray a little bit more than I should have. It was starting to drip even a little bit. That's telling you that's too much glaze in that area, and you should be moving a little faster or back your sprayer up just a little bit as well. So here in coat 2, I'm switching and going side to side. I try and pick a new direction each subsequent coat, just to help kind of with the overlapping areas and make sure that I'm not getting thick and thin spots. What I am developing here now with coat 3 is a really good kind of fur texture. It's almost pebbly. Sometimes when you pick that up, you'll think like, oh, I'm crushing it, am I messing with the glaze? It doesn't tend to show up when it melts. So I did run out of glaze here, so I went and refilled it, just mixed the glaze up, put more in, same color. Everything's good. Adjusting my spray a little bit to help it come out right. The nice part about spraying is it's so much drier than dipping or pouring that the piece can really take
subsequent coats right away. It tends to dry out very quickly in between. And in fact, taking a little bit of a break for the piece as I go fill up my glaze, or my spray gun with more glaze, doesn't hurt it at all either. You can see it's really difficult to kind of get into those interior areas. You can still see that bisque color showing through. There's also some areas, kind of the curve that's going down under, that are hard to get at. I'll show you that later. So I'm going to switch colors here. So I'm going to empty out my existing glaze, fill that up with water, shake it around a bunch, spray it until it's coming out clean, and then I'll put the next coat of glaze in here. I think I chose floating blue. And I'll do kind of a secondary coat in sort of an atmospheric way so that it looks like it flew onto the pot with a directionality. So everything was clean there, ready to get started on the next coat. Every time I start spraying, I always start the spray off of the piece and adjust the nozzle if needed. In this case, you can see how the shape of the object is kind of masking the spray, so it's not getting into those areas that are blocked just by the shape itself. You want to be really careful as you're spraying and doing coats of another glaze. Remember, when you combine two glazes, they tend to get meltier. So just be cautious about where you're putting that. All right, so we're going to pick this up, and you'll be able to see at the bottom that little area I wasn't quite able to get at just from the angle of the spray and its directionality. So you would just fix that up maybe by spraying it from the bottom. You'll notice it's dry to the touch already, and I'm not leaving fingerprints.
Well, that's it for the spraying. Now we just have to clean up the spray booth. So I've already gone ahead and dumped the glaze back into the bucket, and then I've filled this up with water. It's really important that you get the glaze out of this spray gun. If it dries in here, then it is just more difficult to clean up later. But while it's still wet, it comes out very easily. So what we're going to do is fill this with water, screw it on tight, and then give it a shake up and down. There is a little hole in the top that the water will come shooting out of. That's normal. I just want to make sure I'm getting water everywhere inside to clean that out. And then we'll just pull the trigger for a while and spray some of the areas of the booth that we're going to wipe down anyway. And this will get water going through the straw and clean out the interior mechanisms on the gun. I ran my finger over the nozzle a couple of times just to push that water and air up and down in the straw and help clean that out. Once that's clean, we can go ahead and loosen this top, dump the water out, then we'll just take a sponge around in here, and this part of the cleanup will be complete. All that remains now is to wipe down every surface inside of the booth. We're going to start up high and work our way down. And I may take the banding wheel and table out of here as I go. I've got a clean bucket of water, and this should go pretty quickly. You'll notice I turned the hood off at this point. We're not really in danger of particulates, and I'm also not wearing my mask any longer, and that should be fine. You could turn the power switch off if the air compressor keeps kicking on, but you can leave that on until you're done with this step as well. And that's the cleanup process. After watching this video, talk to a staff member to get cleared to use this piece of equipment. The last thing to do is just empty out this bucket that can go in the sink or dumped into the grass. Happy spraying!